PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me again for this episode is Derek Israel, retired homicide detective. Derek, how you doing, sir?
I'm great. How you doing?
Doing good, Derek. I'm doing good. Florida, this time of year, weather doesn't make any sense. Hot. It's like summer in a day and winter at night. It's bizarre.
It's the same problem here in Texas. I'm in Lubbock right now, and it's about 65 degrees today. Pretty sunny. It's been nice out. It's going to snow tomorrow, so you just never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, it's I've been living in Florida for some years. I've never seen it get quite this cold, this frequent, and it's pretty bipolar here, so I don't know. The last time we were speaking, we were talking about being a homicide detective, and I've been, not in relation to reality, but I watch these shows, right? And there's these cops, and they're running around there in regular clothes, and they're going in with the SWAT team. They don't have a helmet on, no vest. Does that drive you nuts when you watch these shows?
Yeah, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of the SWAT team if one guy goes in wearing, his suit and nothing else.
Yeah,
it's doesn't work that way. It's very dramatic on TV, and I understand why they do it on TV. I mean, it's about a particular main character, so you don't want to have scenes that don't involve those characters. So I get that. It's just, it's not real. Obviously, I mean, if we have to use the SWAT team to pull somebody out of a house, I'm sure as hell going to let them do what they want to do and what they do best. And I'm just going to hang behind until they have the scene secured. Then I'll go in and take care of my business.
Yeah, because last night I'm watching this show, and I'm going to be talking to Derek tomorrow. So I'm going to be watching this show, popular show on NBC. And there's the lead detectives, and they're wearing just a suit and tie, and one chick's wearing like I don't know, look like heels.
Right.
And they're standing there right with the SWAT team. And all I can think is, what prevents those bullets from hitting you?
Nothing. Yeah. Even like the clothes that they wear every day is changed. I mean, since I started, when I went into homicide, we were required to wear a tie every day. And, we didn't have to wear a jacket. I mean, it was Texas. It's usually like, ridiculously hot,
right? Especially
in Austin. So, but that was, that professional appearance that you projected. But, as time went on, ideas start changing, and, it's I understand the reason behind it. It's just not super practical, right? Because you do a lot of, going into crime scenes, and even if they're not murders, they are, they're dead bodies. Sometimes, dead bodies have been there for a while. It's messy. Sometimes you have to crawl around, or go out into a park or something, and you're in the mud. So now it's just more common for detectives to wear, instead of the, nice shoes and tie, they wore kind of you could almost say kind of a uniform. They wear like a short sleeve polo shirt,
right?
And some like 5'11" pants, like cargo pants, and some boots or something, and more practical. Plus, as time's gone on, the department expects you to carry more, because we had incidents where detectives got into deadly force situations, and they didn't have all the tools a police officer, a regular like patrol officer would have. Which of course not, because they're not a regular patrol officer. But Austin police, kind of a risk-averse type of police department, so they didn't like that, because if the only weapon you have is a gun, then that's the only weapon you have to be able to use. So they started instituting you having to carry some sort of intermediate weapon like pepper spray or a collapsible baton, or plus you have to carry your radio, all this stuff. So it just makes more sense, and more practical.
Yeah, I always try to put myself in the mind of a police officer when I'm watching these shows, and I think a lot of people watch these shows, and I wonder what percentage of the people think that that's how it is. That's a scary thought, right? They're imagining it's just these two cops, and they're going to take these four guys, and they're going to raid this house. And there's a lot more strategy that's involved with that. And the shows, and I get shows. I get they're supposed to be entertaining. But, man, what kind of message are we conveying to the youth? Like, in other words, like today, especially now, with everything that's going on in law enforcement, you want to attract more of the youth. Like, you want new up-and-comers coming in. And you would hope that they're not basing this on something they saw on TV. And I hear this from other cops. Like, when I was a kid, I saw this on TV, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And then, for them, but in this day and age, they see this on TV, and they're joining the police force, and they're under this false idea of what it's going to be like. And
that's good and bad. I think that's good and bad because so I look back on the things that influenced me to want to be a cop, the type of TV shows that I watched. I watched Adam 12, I watched Chips, I watched T.J. Hooker with William Shatner, and I watched these shows, and they're not Adam 12 probably the most realistic depiction, but even there, it's not particularly realistic. I mean, you're not getting into gunfights every day. And if you do get into a situation where you have to fire your weapon, you're going to sit on administrative duty for a few months while they sort everything out.
Right.
And, it's exciting. It's fun. I mean, if I watch shows about police work and all they did was they're writing reports all day, who would be a cop then? I mean, part of being a cop is the
That's
excitement.
A good point. That's a good point.
There are a lot of things that you do that are not exciting. You write a lot of reports. Sometimes you might get called to the scene and you spend your whole shift like blocking a street because there's either a big crime going on there, or there's been a fatal accident or something, or you spend a big chunk of your shift guarding some prisoner in the hospital. I mean, these things, that's just the way it is. That's reality. But I don't think you could show anyone's job completely realistically and still have people want to watch the show. I mean, I think you can reference it, you can show it, you can show small versions of it. Now, and that's positive. To me, that's the positive part. It's like, it makes people excited about wanting to be a cop. The downside is, like those shows I watched as a kid, they showed police in a positive light. They showed them as on the right side of the law, honest people doing the right thing, or at least always trying to do the right thing. Whereas if you look at kind of more modern shows that are on now, even, in the 90s, really starting in the 90s, in the 2000s, you get a grittier view of police work, which is all right because police work is gritty, but it also shows a lot of cops doing things that are bad. Like they're not necessarily good cops, they're bad cops. And I don't mind there being a depiction of a bad cop, but the problem is sometimes, people will emulate those things that they see because it's cool, right? Or that's their feeling of how it should go. So, so it's
I mean, it could inspire people to behave a certain way, right? And that's true because how many times does someone watch? I'm even guilty of this. Like you watch these movies, Ocean's 11, when they're robbing the casinos. I'm like, well, what would I have done differently there? Of course, it's going to plant the seed. There was this show, probably back in 2008. I watched it a lot. I had the guy on the show, Lenny DePaul, and the show was called Manhunters: Fugitive Task Force, and that was
right.
That was a great show. I mean, that inspired me to want to get in law enforcement. Right, watching that show, you're seeing them how they set up they get in their command post, and then you see them setting up for the mission at hand, and the satellites looking down and showing their different positions, and the chemistry between the I can't call them the cast because they were real cops, so they
right.
So their colleagues, the chemistry of their colleagues, it was a really great show, and I think it produced a very positive vibe around law enforcement. I really think they need to do that again. I think that they need to revise that show. Personally, I don't know if you ever seen it. If you right now, if you go on YouTube and type in Manhunters: Fugitive Task Force, it'll pop up. There's like an A&E like YouTube channel thing going on. And even watching it now.
You know, like I was also real influenced by the TV show Cops, right? Which started in the late 80s, before I became a police officer, because I became a police officer in the early 90s. So it predated my law enforcement career, and it's actually, it got canceled, but I think it got picked up somewhere. So it's still kind of going on now,
right.
You know, so it's gone through all that time. And, you know, that's good and bad because it's real. I mean, this is real police work. They're just following cops around. So it's good in that respect, because it gets people to be able to see what police work is, gets people to excited about it, and they want to be part of that. But, you know, not everything that the cops do on Cops is like maybe the best way of doing things, you know? So,
right.
So it also can teach bad habits related to officer safety, bad habits related to how you interact with people. So those things, and it can teach good ones, because there's some real good cops on there who are real good at speaking with people, who have real good officer safety, that sort of thing. And then you have ones who aren't. So, you know, that can be a little problematic, even for police officers. Like, I'm not talking about someone who isn't a police officer. I'm talking about someone who is a police officer, watches it and says, oh, that's cool. I'm going to do what that person does.
Right.
You know, I like that, which is good. I mean, that's how you learn, as long as it's the right thing to do, you know? And so you started hearing in police work the same sort of silly things that people were saying. You know, you hear people when they're getting ready to pat someone down, you don't have any bombs or grenades on you, you know, that sort of thing. That was always like the thing. Oh, yeah, that was funny maybe the first time you saw, but, you know, after a while, it's just kind of unserious, you know, and and you're doing a serious thing. You're patting someone down for weapons. You want to really know what they have that might want to hurt you. So you maybe want to be more realistic. Like, do you have any knives? Do you have any needles? You know, any weapons at all on you? I don't know. That's just my opinion. You know.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean, there's
as good as anyone else's.
There's got to be some. Yeah, you got to explore professionalism, right? I get it being funny the first time around, just, you know, you got to wonder though, like how many of these people, producers of that show are like, listen, man, we need you to be funny here, you know? Sometimes I guess that plays an effect on them.
Well, I think you have the camera there in front of you.
Right.
I think it does a little bit create a little bit of incentive for you to act for the camera, you know, act a certain way.
Sure. It's human nature.
Yeah. I mean, so here in so I'm in Lubbock right now because I'm in law school, but, you know, I spent the last like 30 years in Austin. And so most of Austin's in Travis County. There's a small part of it to the north. It's in the Williamson County. And then Williamson County is mostly, you know, largely unincorporated county. They have, you know, they ran into a problem because they were having, what I can't remember the name of the TV show. It's like live TV or something like that, where they had cops. It was like Cops, but instead of,
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, instead of like following around with cameras and editing it together later, they actually were shooting live. You know, because technology had gotten to the point where they could shoot live with officers as they were making a traffic stop, and they would have commentators. So it was an interesting show. So the sheriff's department in Williamson County had gotten involved in that, and that ended up causing them a lot of problems. And in fact, it led to ultimately to the show being canceled because, you know, there's this impression, and I can't really speak to the truth of it or not. I mean, this is what the media was making out of it, the newspaper, that, you know, officers were really just trying to make things exciting, you know, so they're doing things like, you know, trying to get into, you know, pursuits, trying to get into situations where they're fighting with somebody, trying to get into situations where they're kicking down doors and stuff. And you know, to a certain degree, that's fine. If you have a TV crew with you, they don't want to, you know, sit there watch you like, you know, eating dinner or something. They want to see you out. So you're gonna, you know, be proactive and make traffic stops, stuff like that. Nothing wrong with that. In this case, there's, you know, kind of went, the allegations anyway, kind of went beyond that. Like they had a guy who they had a warrant for, and apparently was in court that day. Like, and they could have arrested him in court, didn't arrest him in court, went with this live TV crew and busted the guy's door down to arrest him. And he was not like a violent criminal or anything, was my understanding. And so, stuff like that. So
yeah, probably in the name of ratings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, exactly. The show really featured the sheriff's department a lot. They really liked them. They got into a lot of stuff, a lot of chases, a lot of exciting stuff, and so it was good for the show and the network, and it was good for the sheriff's department. The sheriff is an elected guy, so you can see that how hardworking his deputies are or whatever, how action oriented they are. But it all kind of unraveled, and in fact, out of this whole thing, because there was an incident, there was a police chase that led to a use of force that led to the death, an in custody death of a person they were trying to arrest. So he wasn't shot or anything, but he died as a result of the arrest. And as a result of it, a couple of officers were indicted, and I'm not saying that's appropriate at all, because we have DAs now who are going after cops for nothing, just doing their job. But
it's sad to say, because a lot of this is due to your public appearance and trying to satisfy
right.
the public, and it's unhealthy,
right?
It's not balanced.
Yeah, and ultimately, even the sheriff got charged with it, and an attorney working for the county there, because there was issues with getting the video. So you had this crew who's shooting the video, and they edit it and they put it on the air, and then they're done with it. They just reuse the tapes or whatever. And whoever was supposed to get those tapes didn't get them. And at least according to the DA, the sheriff had a lot to do with the fact that they got destroyed. And so they charged the sheriff with tampering with evidence. So, I mean, it's just, you got.
It's really hard to be a police officer now. It sounds like it's really hard.
It is, and I'm not judging this case one way or the other. I mean, maybe the sheriff's office there was trying to do some, get a lot of publicity. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Maybe they're publicity hounds. But then again, I know for sure that the DA's office is they're really eager to go after law enforcement. So it's we just have to see what happens when it comes out. It'd be forever before it finally goes to trial. But it's an interesting saga, and also I think to a certain degree, I really like the media being involved with police, because that allows the public to see what the police do. But at the same token, if you're the police, you do have to focus on doing your job, and focus on that first.
It should be a priority, no doubt. I wonder, you got to wonder how much pressure's on court systems because of the media. Probably a lot, right? I wonder how many of their decisions are swayed on that. Well, I mean, unless there's a jury involved, and even then, today, if something happens, if there's a major crime, it's not like you could hide it with today's information, right? It's impossible. So how do you get a jury of 12 peers who are, they don't know anything about it? It's impossible, I think. But, the greater the crime, the more the coverage, right? I mean, obviously there's a jury for a guy who's a repeat offender for drugs. They're not going to know anything about him. But a crime that's sensationalized, especially with murder in this country, I stopped watching the news because of that. Everything horrible would be the big headline, right? So and it goes to, I mean, look at the Derek Chauvin trial, which is that officer in Minneapolis who was tried because of George Floyd's death. I mean, you think the jury didn't know about that? Oh no!
You think the jury didn't know that there's going to be a riot if the right decision doesn't come. I'm not saying that they reached the wrong decision. I'm just saying that
right. But I know what you're saying.
It could very well be the decision that they got to, whether it was right or wrong. It's and that's very hard. And I think it's kind of a weird disconnect, because if you look at like a quote unquote liberal DA, right, a real, like we have, normally you think, here's a person who's super defense oriented, and that, traditionally, and the idea of a traditional liberal, which to a certain degree we kind of all are, is that, you want to make sure that everyone gets a fair trial. It doesn't matter how heinous the crime. Everyone's entitled to representation, a fair trial, all of that. But somehow when it involves the cops, that all just goes out the window. And these same DAs who are so sympathetic towards every other type of defendant and so insistent that every bit of their legal rights is respected, all of a sudden when you got a cop in the crosshairs, that all just goes out the window. I mean, there's, it
becomes a circus.
It's a prosecute driven situation where it's like, we want to put this guy in jail. Let's just figure out what it takes to do it, and whatever it takes. And it's, that's where we've gotten in a lot of our big cities. That's certainly not true in probably most cities in America, but in some of our biggest cities, that's the way it is. And it's very sad, and it's very sad. And I'm not saying that cops shouldn't be held accountable, and cops shouldn't be put in jail when they do stuff that's illegal, that's wrong, that's immoral. Although actually it should only be illegal. Just because they do something immoral, think it's immoral, they shouldn't be put in jail. But still, these, but they still should be afforded the complete set of civil rights that every other American citizen or non-citizen, any person who steps foot in the United States is entitled to.
Yeah, and another thing they need to really, I'm not saying, I don't believe in censorship, but I also don't like how different media outlets will speak their opinions on the case, right? Because they're not exactly doing it to get the facts out there. They want to one up the other media company, right? And so they're stating their opinions in the case. And what you're doing is you're influencing not just a jury, but the public in general. And what happens is when you influence the public, just because of ratings, mind you, I'm going to be blunt about that. Some of these people that do this coverage, they're worried about ratings and their competitor. What do we have more than the competitor? Anyway, the long story short, when you say these things, you put attention into the general public, and then you have a division. And whether good or not, or whatever the outcome of the case is, there's a large body of people that are going to be unhappy with it. And depending on how they react to it, it's a scary thing. Like the media, it's actually pretty dangerous. Social media is pretty dangerous stuff. And I was just talking to someone about even with faith, with religion. Religion's a great thing across the board. It's got a positive message in all religions until you put it in the hands of a very charismatic dictator who then influences you to be radicalized with it. And then it becomes dangerous. So you take a beautiful thing, and because you're feeding on that power and you want to sit above all, and you're competing with other people that are head of their religions, you have problems. And that's where problems start, right? Because people are influenced by these glorified, they speak well, they're charismatic, and you feel like you're getting the adequate information, and it just blows up in everyone's face. And now it's unfair to not just the defendant and the judge and the lawyers. Now you have a jury who are sitting there like, well, what should I do? Because they're not. I wonder how many are not. They're not even considering the facts of the case. They just I want to err on the right side of this. That's a problem. Yeah,
I mean, there's, they call that tainting the jury pool, right? I mean, when you're putting, it used to be a big deal, more, liberal-minded people were like, hey, you shouldn't try someone in the media. You shouldn't crucify them and find them guilty before they even have a chance to go to court. Now, I think it's okay to comment on someone and something, but to me, it's different. Commentators are different than the government. So a lot of times, we have. So let me take an example that is kind of a typical example, and I don't like this, and it's something that police do. We never did it where I was at, but some agencies like NYPD, they're kind of famous for it, and that's the perp walk, right?
Right.
You arrest somebody, right, and you make sure the whole media is there, and you walk that guy, into the jail, with two cops, a cop on either side of him and all that. To me, that's not. You should avoid that. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's unavoidable because you're just, I'm talking about trying to, like, you call the media and say, be here at this place and this time, and you can get video of this guy walking. To me, as a cop, you're now guilty of trying to have that person tried in the media. You know what I mean? To see him, to get into some juror's mind watching this guy, walking in handcuffs into the police station. I think so. You have to be very careful, and the comments that people make about, if you're a prosecutor, your comments about a case should be brief. Almost all your talking should happen in court. When you present evidence,
right?
But a defense attorney, whatever. Defense attorneys, that's their job. They're not the government. They can go out and say that. But when you're the prosecutor, you have to, and it doesn't matter if the suspect is someone who's just a Joe off the street accused of some heinous crime, or it's a cop accused of some heinous crime, right? We have to respect that. And somehow nowadays, it doesn't seem to be a problem for prosecutors and people in the government, political officials, to just crucify, police officers without, prior to them being able to get any sort of fair trial. I mean, how would it be if you're on trial and the president of the United States already told everyone you're guilty?
Oh yeah.
How can you get a fair trial?
Yeah, you're fried. Yeah, that's right. The general public is going to, and then that defaults back to these people in the jury who just want to err on the right side. I think they're probably more concerned about what are people going to think about me. This is the day and age we're in. We're really concerned about what people think about us. I don't. I never cared, but the majority though, right? That is like this woman, the female cop. She pulled the wrong weapon out, shot the dude. That was heartbreaking to hear that entire story. But here's a reality though. If I get pulled over by a cop and I feel like I'm being treated inappropriately, I will record what's going on, and B, if they're going to arrest me, I'm going to let it happen, because we're going to fight with the police. They have these things that come crawling out of the cracks, and they're called lawyers, and they're educated and equipped to deal with this scenario. So record what's going on at that point, and then consult an attorney, but don't punch the gas and run, because then you're going to put a cop in a position where what else are they supposed to do? They have to, they got to potentially stop, and they don't know if you're dangerous or not. People, if you punch your gas and run from the police, if it was for something as minor as like weed in the car, or maybe you were Ted Bundy, in either case, that cop doesn't know that. And they don't know if you're going to go do harm the next stop. You're at said point, just comply. And if you have a warrant, oh, well, guess what? Don't do dumb shit. You won't get a warrant, right? And get an attorney if you feel like you've been mistreated. But at the end of the day, if you're putting up a fight, it's a poor choice. And then you put somebody in a position where it's the heat of the moment. They pull the wrong weapon and something like that. Now forget jail. She's got to live with that. I heard devastation in her when I watched that video. Devastation that happened. So it's tough. It's a tough world we live in. There's a lot of rights and wrongs, even things I'm going to say. People are like, oh, you're an idiot. But it's probably the wisest idea is just to comply and at least absorb information. What's going on here? And if at said point, then record what's going on and then, let it figure out properly. But in a heated moment, cooling minds don't prevail, right? Logic has to prevail on both ends. And
yeah. And the appropriate thing you're stopped by the police or approached by the police and you think that you're being treated inappropriately, wrongly, I mean, as long as, it's not some sort of unprovoked violent attack against you, if you're, just disagree with why the cop stopped you, or have a problem with his attitude or, his justification for what he's doing, then what you need to do is stay calm, stay calm, be the adult in that situation. If you think that officer's doing something wrong, stay calm so you can never be accused of being the aggressor in that. Record if you can, have witnesses, whatever, but, or at least document the incident, write it down after it happens, be able to explain it. And I'll tell you, in those cases, when things happen, and the person remains calm and it's the cop that's doing the wrong thing, it's very apparent. It's very apparent. And those are the cases where there really isn't a divide. People aren't like, I don't know if the cop acted well or not. No, that's usually when it's like, that cop acted like an asshole, or, that was completely wrong. And everyone's in agreement with it. It's when you introduce like your own attitude, and it's hard. We all got attitudes, right?
Yep.
It's hard sometimes to control it, but if you can keep your own attitude out of it and certainly, just comply with what's going on, you'll have your chance. You'll have your chance to tell your story, and hopefully there's nowadays the cops are providing the videotape. The body cameras, they have car cameras. So now more than ever, if you're in a situation like that, you're in a much better position to go and make your case. But the key to me is stay as calm as you can. You might be really angry, justifiably angry, because something's going on. But it's also possible you don't understand you don't have a full understanding of what's going on, just because, you came in, the cop's been dealing with a story that's been going on, for an hour, and you came in right at the end of the story. And so you don't know what's been going on, or what he thinks, or why he might suspect you, or think that you're doing something you're not. So, yeah.
Or even if they're screening for a murderer, you look, it might be an inconvenience if you're pulled, stopped, or being detained for the moment. But especially if they're screening for a murderer, right? You want to comply. You want to help eliminate the suspect pool so they can get to that murderer that's potentially in your community. I mean,
right.
A large part. I said this before on another podcast. I was talking to friends about it. We should really do more in our communities to have meet and greets with the local law enforcement. Like, I don't care if it's a block party or a barbecue, whatever it may be. Something that puts you in a position to start becoming familiar with them. So, like an example would be where I live. If I orchestrate something where we have like a community thing and the cops come in, we meet them, they know us, and et cetera, et cetera. If something happens in your neighborhood, it's going to help police figure out what's going on fast. Because if they see me outside, I'm a tattooed guy, you know what I mean? But if they already know who I am, all right, well, that's him. We're not looking for him. And they can make the neighborhood aware. I think crime starts slowing down. Because I fear the day where people don't want to become cops anymore because of all the nonsense going on. And then I try to imagine a world without it. It's crazy.
Yeah, that day's getting closer. It's really hard to recruit cops right now. But to what you said, I think that most police departments do try to do what you're saying. I mean,
well, no, not the department. It's the citizens that should be responsible to do that. The people.
Well, a lot of times citizens will. A lot of times they will. A lot of times it's up to the police to offer that opportunity.
Right.
And then the police, and those citizens can be part of it, can take advantage of that. Like there's National Night Out, which usually involves a lot of block parties and the police are there and interacting with citizens. You have things like Shop with a Cop or Donuts with a Cop or Coffee with a Cop, just different little outings where you can just go down and drink coffee with a cop, or these different events where the cops are actually the waiters or whatever. And there's Citizen Police Academy where people can go and actually, learn about the different aspects of policing and, kind of get a better understanding of how police think and why they do the things that they do. But I think, I think there is for sure, there's a responsibility on the community side, but there's also a responsibility on the police side. I mean, it's a two-way street. I mean, the police have, I mean, I'm a cop and I've had cops just be total assholes. You know what I mean? And it's just like, well, that's so unnecessary. And if you're like that to me, I'm a cop. How are you to people you deal with on the street where you have a lot more power over them?
Right.
So sometimes we just, as police, I mean, and I'll tell you, that has gotten so much better. Like the quality of officers that they recruit now. I mean, go watch cops from the 1980s and see how they talk to people. You'd be like, I wouldn't put up with someone talking to me like that, right? Yeah. But at the time, that's the way it was. Right. That's how it was. Nobody thought anything of it. And then fast forward to a Cops episode from 2020 or something, and or 2022, and you're going to see, police being a lot more patient with people, explaining things better, de-escalating, and just having a kind of a wider array of tools that's a reflection of changes in training, and it's also just a reflection of the quality of applicants they get. I think a lot of times you're getting a lot better applicants. Not that my generation were bad applicants or anything, but I think they're really they're searching for those traits, those particular traits.
Right.
Back when I started, they're looking like, oh, you were in the Army, that's good. We like that. Or you have a college degree, that's good. We like that. You do well on a civil service test, that's great. But that doesn't mean you could talk to people, right? It doesn't mean that you have the patience to do the job. And there's psychological screening, but it doesn't always do that. I think they're just better now at finding those people and also, cultivating that in the police academy with officers. So, it's an evolving thing.
Another big thing, another big factor, I personally think is, I hear the whole defund the police thing, and what comes to mind to me is you should increase the funds. You should increase their salaries. Bear in mind, police officers go deal with things that other people don't want to deal with regularly. They will walk into situations that most people don't want to go walk into. And so that being said, when you're increasing the salary, and then you increase that, allowing them to increase training and give them more incentives, it's got to be frustrating to serve and protect. And you don't want to just survive. You want to be able to provide for your family. You want to be able to live in a good community. And then, you take your job, it comes with the job. Like most people, I think I read a study. Most people with higher salaries have a better quality of life. The majority, anyway, is what I've read. That doesn't speak to everyone, because there's competitive jobs that are high salary, and the stakes are just as high. Like if you're an emergency surgeon, for example. But the point I make is, I think they should increase salaries for law enforcement. I think they should increase training. Like it should be standard practice for them to learn jiu-jitsu, right? So this way you could detain someone without, being life risking. You can learn a wrist lock. I mean, so when I say these things, when you're increasing the budget, you're allowing greater quality to walk to the door, right? Because being a detective for you, like being a homicide detective, that's a very cognitive job. That's not like you're just running out there and it's cops, robbery, chase. It requires intellect, a lot of it. And, you want to, I imagine, like for cops, you want to hire from within, right? So you want people to climb that ladder. And what a good incentive for there to be a major salary bump, and you're getting an education, and it's a really cognitive position, So I think that would steer things in the right direction personally, because defunding them is definitely not the answer. Because you defund them, and you're going to have a bunch of criminals out there, opportunists. To them, that's a payday. They know that there's really nothing going to get in the way of them committing crime.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I don't necessarily think that just paying someone more means you're going to get a better quality person.
Well, no, not, I mean, it's not about that. It's saying pay them more because, in other words, it's a dangerous job, right? Very dangerous job. And I've spoken to some people off podcasts, and I said, well, why don't you ever become a cop? And I'm not, I kid you not. Here, let me read this to you. The larger percentage said the pay wasn't good enough. They were interested in it, but the pay wasn't good enough. Some of these people went on to become private investigators for pay, right? Other of them became investigators for corporate. But that blows my mind so that was a lot of answers. Like the pay wasn't good. I'm like, that's horrible to hear.
It is, and it depends on the police department too. So my kind of thinking is, I came from a large police department. We actually were pretty well paid, and but smaller police departments, small sheriff's department in Texas, you're not getting paid much at all. So it's very hard to recruit someone. I mean, if you say, I want an intelligent officer, college degree, someone who's just hardworking and really sharp, you gotta pay, because that person has other opportunities besides just being a cop.
Right.
Now, now on the other hand, I say back when cops got paid crap, like when I started, the people who were there really wanted to be cops. You know what I mean? They really wanted to be cops. And that's why they were there. They weren't there for the pay. So it is a trade-off, no one was like, oh, if I get a better offer, I'm leaving immediately. Everyone's like, this is the coolest job. Why would I do anything else? So, and later on, pay starts kicking in as you start your family or whatever. But it's a tough thing. And so let's look at the Austin Police Department. They're well paid, but they can't keep officers. And this is why, because they have a horrible city government. They have a prosecutor who's crazy, who's, indicting cops and just left and right and unfairly. I mean, I don't think people would have a big problem if it was like, they're indicting bad cops. They're indicting cops who, in my opinion, in a lot of cases did nothing wrong. And at best, it's, arguable that they did something wrong, without really doing a thorough investigation and really determining the facts. So who wants to work in that environment? I don't care if you pay them $1 million. People want,
that's a good point. Yeah,
people are gonna leave, and so it's like a cycle. You run everyone off. How do you get them back? We got to pay them more, right?
Yeah.
So it costs even more to do it like that, and or else what happens, and sadly, and we've seen this in some big cities, we've seen this, like Washington, D.C. was a big example where LAPD also big example of where they just started losing a lot of cops. Let's use LA. Like after Rodney King, they lost a lot of cops, and because the environment became real hostile towards police, so everyone kind of just retired and left, and it was hard to hire new cops. No one wanted to be a cop. So, it was very challenging. And so what happens in that situation? I mean, you got to have cops, right? So you hire people, but they're not necessarily your first choice. Maybe they're not even your fifth choice. So they end up hiring people who probably should not have been hired. So what happens, several years later, that leads to the Rampart scandal, because now you've brought in a bunch of cops who were like literally had been gang members, and now they're running things like they're a gang, and it's a vicious cycle of corruption, because then you start seeing more corruption, and then that drives more people away, and more people don't want to come to the police department, and then you lower your standards even more, and we've seen this with a lot of police departments. And I'm not knocking those police departments, because they're great police departments. I mean, Los Angeles Police Department is just it's just amazing, but this is the problem you run into when you vilify police. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You basically are saying police are bad, we hate police, cops leave, no one wants to be a cop, and then pretty soon you have a reason to hate them because they are what you thought they were. You know, they're criminals because that's all they can hire.
Yeah,
So,
and you know,
yeah,
it's unfortunate too because there's smaller police departments out there, right? There's a police officer I'd speak to on LinkedIn a lot. Brett Preston. He's with he's a sergeant in the town Sneed's Police Department, and they're a small group. You know, there's 6 guys, something like that, but they're tight knit, and they really truly care about their community and their job, and then because of the actions of one bad seed across the nation, it paints them into the same light, and it's unfortunate.
Well, I've dealt a lot with the small police departments, and I've always enjoyed it. I mean, they're usually, you know, they do have a certain number of sort of, you might call transient, you know, officers who come and work for a little while and they do something else. But you know, the ones who are there have stayed there. They just know everybody, man. I mean, they know, like, if they're in a small county, you could describe somebody, and they're like, "Oh, that's, you know, Billy Joe. Let's go out to his trailer right now. I know where he's at." You know, and so they really know it, and they're, you know, in a large police department, you get a lot of specialists. You know, I was a homicide detective before. That was a robbery detective. You know, we have detectives who do nothing but investigate, you know, people killed in car accidents or sexual assaults or, you know, computer crimes or, you know, certain types of financial crimes and certain other types of financial crimes. And, you know, you have very specialized. That's not that way in a small police department. In a small police department, you got to know how to do it all.
Right.
And so that's kind of interesting too. You know, I mean, it's like, it's a generalist kind of thing when they, and sometimes a small police department might have one detective. That's it. And you know, that person kind of just takes whatever happens in the city. So, you know, sometimes that's not good. Sometimes they have poor quality people, and a lot of times they have poor quality leadership because it's, you know, it can be hard. You're not competing with a big city for, you know, a highly experienced police chief. You're probably going to hire someone. This is their first police chief gig. So I
wonder if there's like a training program that's across the board, right? Or something they could create that way.
For
like a police chief, like even if you're being raised up from the ranks, maybe there's like a 2 weeks where you're in training again, right?
There is. I mean, there are some what they call command level courses that you can take. For example, in Texas, Sam Houston State University, they have like a command leadership college, which is considered to be excellent. And the FBI has the FBI National Academy. So police leaders go there, and they really get a broad, and I think that's 6 months long. And so it's a really in-depth training of all the issues regarding, running an agency. So they do, but it's still hard, even those resources, you're going to send your police chief. You got, a lot of small towns, a lot of times the police chief is a working chief. He's just another patrol officer. He's just the one who's in charge. Right. So you can't send that guy off for 6 months to some, leadership program or whatever.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
There are resources, I'm sure, online type of resources. Some are mandatory that you're required to take, like FEMA courses and stuff like that, incident management courses, so you know how to interact in the event of a large incident. Whether it's an ammonia leak from a rail car, a plane crash, a terrorist incident, a major crime scene, whatever that is. Like, and I got major crime scene.
I got something for you. I got something for you. I have to ask this. So recently, I had Mike Penicello and Dan Spell on the show. They're both from MUFON, UFO ufology.
Right, UFO.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so Dan Spell's a former Department of Defense agent, and we got into a discussion about a week ago, and we asked. I guess I asked, and then it was brought up. This is post podcast, by the way. But we were talking about, do police have a protocol for per se UFOs? Like, let's say, I mean, who? It's a good question. I never thought to ask it, but if one crashes, who do they contact? Right, it'd have to be the FBI, I imagine.
That is an interesting thing. That is not something that they teach you in the police academy. They don't teach you in the supervisor school. They don't teach you in leadership academies. So that would definitely be something you'd have to make up as you went along.
Because
if it was,
he asked me if there's a protocol, because he knows I speak to police, right? He knows I talk to him. I do off podcast interviews too. So, and it's for me to gather information because eventually I'm going to do a documentary for a bunch of stuff. But when he asked that to me, I was like, wow, I don't know. Like, it's just in my mind, because let's think about it. If it's spotted in one part of the state and it crashes in another, it's crossed several jurisdictions, right? So then you would have to contact.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, the local people are always going to be, I mean, people have one number they know to call when they see something like that, and that's 911.
Right.
So it's going to go to the local fire department, the local police department. Those people are going to respond out. At that point, you know, they're going to have to figure out what they have. You know, is this a piece of debris that fell down, or is this a ship that's got people, you know, aliens crawling out of it? What exactly is going on? And you know, go from there. To me, it's like, okay, if something crashes, I mean, unless something's crawling out of it, if it crashes on the ground and it's some sort of aircraft, even if it's an alien aircraft, I'm like, I know exactly who to call. You call the FAA, right?
That's what I said.
This is an aircraft crash, and they could figure out that it came from another planet. It's not my responsibility, you know. So, yeah, I would think that would be how it went. I mean, if it was just like, oh, some weird type of aircraft just hit the ground. Now, you know, if aliens were coming out of it, that's a whole different story. Who the hell knows how anyone would react to that? I remember one time I had in the district I worked, there was a cemetery, and it was along this little road. It's in the city of Austin, but it was on this road that, you know, now I think has a bunch of apartment complexes on it. At the time was just nothing was on it. In fact, the biggest problem that happened there is people would go out there and dump trash in the road, like, you know, construction trash and stuff like that.
Right.
But there was this cemetery there, and I sometimes when I wanted to take a break and just relax for a minute, be by myself, I'd go out there. Sometimes you can walk through the cemetery, and you know, it was also a good place to write reports because, you know, you don't have to worry about someone walking up on you or something like that. So, and it was along the side of the road, so I wouldn't have to go into the cemetery. I could just pull along the side of the road next to the cemetery. And so I was out there, and one of my partners came out there, and we were just sitting there talking to each other the way patrol cops do, you know, with their cars facing opposite direction. And he's like, what would you do if a zombie just started walking out of that graveyard right now? Right. You know, like, I'm like, man, I hadn't thought about that. I think I'd probably, it better not be a fake, because I'm pretty sure I'd empty my gun into the thing. You know,
yeah.
I mean, I'm just as nervy as anyone else. Right. So, yeah, so that's funny. So it is interesting to think about those things. You know, I know that, some of these UFO reports, actually some of the better ones, have been witnessed by police, and that does give it, you know, tends to give it like a
large percent,
authoritative feel to it. So that's an interesting story, you know. Now I'm trying to think back, because there was a time where I had to work. It wasn't a 911. It was in communications. It was like we had a 311, which was like non-emergency numbers.
Right.
And I think we actually had the MUFON number. If someone called in and they wanted to report a UFO, we would just give them that number. So,
yeah,
there you go.
A lot of former police are becoming MUFON members. I've been learning this. Detectives, just every kind of police. Which is a welcome thing, right? Because you have people who are trained to observe, they're trained to investigate, and MUFON does really good at investigating. I mean, it's not, you don't just become a member of MUFON and you're off, go get some stuff. You're trained, right? You have to learn. Like I have Doug Wilson coming on again. He's the lead investigator for the United States coming on. His approach is there's a lot of strategy there and a lot of education, a lot of equipment. It's not as simple as just pointing a digital camera, because those are pretty much unreliable. It's just, it's trying to recreate what it is you're looking at. So it's not as easy as most people might think. And what I'm hearing, like Chris DiPerno was on, he's a former homicide detective and he's a MUFON member investigator right now.
Right.
It's interesting to hear that. And to your point about zombies, I never thought of that either, because you see the movies, and when the outbreaks happen, the military's like, what is the protocol for a city if something like that were to take place?
Right.
That's some scary stuff.
Whatever that protocol is, they're not going to tell us what it is.
Right.
It's probably pretty ugly, whatever it is.
Out of any movie I've ever seen, like The Walking Dead example, I don't. These things they're in a state of necrosis. How are they even walking around? To me, I never really got into that. But when you watch I Am Legend, that scares the shit out of me, because that's a viral thing, and it sounds feasible if you think about it, right? And that I remember going to see that movie, and I left that theater feeling some kind of way because it's the idea of it scared me.
I don't remember if I told you this before, but growing up, man, when as a kid, I was not scared of monsters, right? I was not scared of vampires. I was not scared of, vampires, Frankenstein, any of that stuff. I wasn't scared of zombies. None of that stuff bothered me. What scared the shit out of me was Bigfoot, right? Because like that to me just seemed like just real enough that it could happen, right? And I lived up in Michigan. That's where I grew up, and there are a lot of Bigfoot sightings up there at the time in areas not too far from me. And my dad lived on a lake, but it was in a rural area, so you had a lake on one side, and then on the back is just woods and everything. And my dad, he didn't have any like coverings on the windows, right? So there's no window shades or anything. So if you walk by, you could look right out the window. And if it was dark, like in the winter, it's snowy, there's snow on the ground, there's a full moon, it's like bright out there. I would not look out those windows because I was so scared that I would look out there and see Bigfoot. And I wasn't even scared that he was going to do something to me. I was just scared I would die of fright if I saw him, because it was just like my worst nightmare, but I was just so, I watched all those like Bigfoot documentaries, in the 70s. And then like, I loved this show, $6 Million Man, and they had like a Bigfoot, thing on there. And you're talking about a gigantic bipedal ape, right? So when I first started this podcast, my thoughts on Bigfoot were like, no way, that's horseshit. They'd find this thing, right? But then you start examining how vast and how large some of these areas are where this thing could be hiding. And you can't, I was talking to Mike LaRosse on the show. He does crypto. And to his point, like things like all right, so an example, what is that? The what's that big lizard? There's the Komodo dragon. Komodo dragon. Komodo dragon, yeah. That thing was a myth. It was considered horseshit until they went and found it. And I mean, in the early 1900s, not that long ago. Right.
So, that being said, in Florida, I can name a handful of times, one more recently where I was on a walk with a friend and I panned left and there was a bobcat sitting there and I didn't know it.
Right.
I wasn't even one that saw it. She did. And I was like, it stayed right there. Like literally probably, if I had to guess, probably about 20 yards away, but I didn't know it was there. And it was broad daylight out. So, and there's another incident when I was younger where we were out with some friends in the woods hanging out, fishing and whatever. And in the distance, you could see a Florida panther just sitting there staring at us. And the reality is none of us had, and that's a big animal. And we didn't even know it was there. And so when I started examining the places where these Bigfoots are being alleged to be seen, and, these are creatures that they are smart. Like, again, there's no way a panther's smarter than I am, but it was stealth and it was there without my awareness. Now talk about something that's smarter, that's wandering around, that it's acclimated to the woods, and for its color, or at least what they say it is, it blends in well. You're not going to know it's there, and that freaks me out. So I can see your point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of things in the woods that can hide, and you'll just never see them. And I guess people who know what they're talking about say there's no way like a large ape creature could live in North America, and I don't know what to think about that. I do know that if you look over in Russia, you think we have forests.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be Sasquatch cities in there, and you'd never know it.
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, it's so vast. There's so much about this world we don't really understand. We like to think that we're masters of the planet. We're the 21st century. We've seen it all, right? We know what's going on. We don't know crap,
Yeah,
so
we really don't.
yeah, I mean, we're just learning things, and
we know more about Mars than we do our oceans. That's the scary part.
Absolutely. And scientists and physicists who just sit pondering, I know that they have a mathematical way of doing it, but I'll just call it pondering. They sit pondering the nature of the universe itself. And I find it fascinating. I mean, I wish I was smart enough to be able to follow, be able to do the math and whatnot, but it's amazing. And
well, yeah, I mean, I watch a lot of documentaries.
You can't take for granted even the nature of the universe itself, the reality of existence itself. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah. I mean, I sat around one day thinking about this. I watched a documentary about the universe, our galaxy, and then the universe. And then the idea that our universe is a bubble, and then there's multiple bubbles and it's infinite. And when you sit there and think about that, like, holy crap, like you think about the sheer scale of that, it makes you feel so minute. And then, so the idea that there's no other life anywhere else, that's crazy to say. Something's out, even if it's primitive, it's on another planet and it's still in their Bronze Age. There's something out there that's intelligent.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, life could be out there, but it's alien life, right?
Of course.
So what is it going to look like? I mean, not only may we not recognize it if it's out there somewhere in the galaxy, it could be sitting next to you and you might not recognize it. You may not realize its nature, because that's not what you're looking for. When we're looking for aliens, we're looking for, these little gray things with big eyes that, kind of look like humans, but, kind of don't. They're just modified humans, right? Nothing says that's what aliens have to look like.
It's true.
Nothing at all. They can look like anything. They could look like a blob of something, I mean,
there could be a planet out there, and I've said this a lot. There could be a planet that's all water, and they're really sophisticated, intelligent creatures, but they can't escape their environment. They can't build a craft to leave. So they could be as intelligent as us, but they're trapped, right? They can't. I mean, it's a lot to ask to fill up your ship with water, then leave the atmosphere, and it's even more impossible. We're trying to do with oxygen, and that's just like gas, So, right.
Well, and I think there's probably practical limits on how advanced this, civilization of blobs, let's say, it could be, just simply because, they probably would not have the capability to build, tools and machines and things like that. But we assume that, but that's limited by our own imagination, and our imagination is limited by our experiences. So we don't really know until we've seen some different examples of what alien life looks like, of what to expect alien life to look like. So, all these SETI missions we have, which I think are great, well, first of all, the initial SETI missions, they're only looking for people who are very intentionally trying to contact us,
right?
With strong radio beams, right? And so there's so many assumptions wrapped up in that right there that, the odds are just seem very low that we're going to find someone, trying to do that.
Yeah. We're assuming that they've been broadcasting for better than 1,000 years, because it takes about, I think it's like 100,000 years for one of our radio waves across the galaxy, let alone the universe, right? So I think we're betting on the idea that if they are advanced, that they've been broadcasting for quite some time, and that's what we're hoping to find. I think this James Webb Telescope is going to speak volumes about habitable planets long before anything else that we've had going for a while. I think this is the game changer currently.
Yeah, I think that's going to be great. I think that there are, in addition, there were some other things specifically designed to find habitable planets that were on the NASA schedule, but didn't, got cut for, because they were not panning out.
Right.
So yes, I agree. I think that this James Webb Telescope is gonna, just the way Hubble did. The Hubble taught us so much, and now this is going to take us to next region. The closest habitable planet could be only 4 light years away, because they have found planets orbiting the nearest star system, Proxima Centauri.
Yeah, and it's in the Goldilocks zone, as they call it.
Right. And so perhaps, the Webb telescope will be able to give us a little bit more information about that. Does it have an atmosphere, and what kind of atmosphere can it have? And that's the next question right there. And you can do that remotely, the ways to figure that out. And I think they've already done it on a few planets, just, in a very rudimentary way,
right.
To detect a couple of elements there. But, hopefully, we need the next thing. Really what we need, we need a couple of things to happen to move to the next level of our existence technologically, of our civilization, I should say.
Right.
So for our civilization to move into the next level, we need to solve the energy problem. And by that, I don't mean wind, and I don't, whatever. I'm talking about fusion power or something similar.
Right.
Something that can provide
sustainable energy for a long period of time.
Energy that's non-polluting, and that can power, that's small enough to power very powerful ships. So that's one. The power requirements are always there. We have to, as a civilization, because of for environmental reasons, for just existence reasons. Trying to get to that next step of of being able to use like fusion power, to where I could have a generator the size of little Honda generator and run half a city on. You know what I mean? Because it generates so much electricity.
We only need rocket fuel really to escape Earth. That's it. Because once you're in space, if you could come up with a clever enough propellant, you could travel around. Traveling at the speed of light, that's a whole other challenge. I don't know. I'm going to leave that to Elon. But the point I make is we're going to have to, I think we should start using the moon as a proving ground, right? Like a middle area if we're going to travel. Because to leave the moon, that requires really no power, right? Very little anyway, because it's a vacuum of space. And I was told,
it's a vacuum, and it has the gravity is like 6/10 of Earth. So it requires less energy to get off. And gravity, gravity works on a surface. It's like exponentially. So as gravity goes down, the energy requirements become significantly less.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to figure. I think before we even get to that point, the one thing we need to address is here on Earth to start viewing each other as a species and start removing some of these divisions we have, like your religion, your race, your politics, and blah, blah, blah. We got to behave as a species, or we're not, there's no shot at being interplanetary. We're just going to take our problems from here to the next. Like if Elon sets up on Mars and he starts building a community, I promise the application is not going to have the box saying, what's your sex? It's not going to have the box saying, what's your religion? It's not going to have the box that says, what's your race? It just cares about your qualifications and what you could bring there. That's it. All that other nonsense won't be on the application. I guarantee it. That's not how he's going to view it. He's going to view what you could contribute to that project, which is a big deal if we get to that point.
And I'm skeptical that humanity has it in it to eliminate our divisions. You know, I mean, I hate to say that, but I think, it's part of our programming. It's part of who we are as a species. It's part of what made us,
it's that
the masters
age-old
of the earth, of the planet, you say, but I'm not sure it's biologically wired. I'm not sure how easily it's going to be.
It is going to be tough
to unwire that,
because that is a DNA passed down of tribalism. It's just, we've, since hunter gatherers, long before language was established, we knew this is our little group of people. We hunt, we gather, don't bother us, we'll kill you. All right. It wasn't until the establishment of writing and language and people try to want to trade things. And that's really where it really got started, right? Trading, like, oh, they got some goods. We'll give you some of our goods for your goods. So it was really like, what am I going to get out of it type attitude that established greater language and greater communications. And then we just found reasons not to like each other for reasons I
don't know that we've gotten past the what's in it for me stage. I mean, I think that's still the stage we're in. I mean, I think you're right. So you have hunter gatherer groups, right? They all contribute in some way. So it's a biological imperative or a survival imperative to stick together and all work cooperatively. And then, as things grow and you develop agriculture and communities, then you find benefits and those things like that, but it's still, I think ultimately it's always still what's in it for me. I think that people are, it's deeply rooted in humans to act, in what economists say, rational self-interest, right? I think that is, we see exceptions to that, examples of altruism, but I don't know if that's the rule. I think that's the exception. Now, every once in a while something happens that just makes me feel like, restores my faith in humanity, but it's so rare. And that's not to say I think that everyone is bad or everyone is evil. I mean, I always thought as a police officer, it's funny. I always thought, we spend so much time learning how to retain our weapons and not having it taken away from us, so we're not killed with it and all of that. I at some point I finally realized I don't care where you're at. You can be the worst neighborhood in town. I could set my gun down on a table and no one's going to hurt me with it. 99 out of 100 people are not going to hurt me with it. Now it's that one guy that I have it in a holster, secured, that's hard for someone to get that gun away from me, and I'm trained to maintain it. And that's also the same person who's the only reason I'm even carrying the gun in the first place. Right.
He represents that percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, to a certain degree, I have a certain faith and trust in humanity, and another, I just, I've seen too much of our worst instincts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. It makes me, I'll tell you what, Ronald Reagan years ago said, imagine the differences between us that separated under the alien threat, et cetera, which is true. We would have to bind together, right? Unless, well, I don't know, not all of us. Like some countries, like, listen, we'll back you up if you give us control of the planet. Some people, that's just unfortunate. It's a human nature thing, right? But if we did have a massive war with some alien threat and we hypothetically won, we'd go right back to where we were. It would be a matter of time. We would divide again. It's a strange thing, the division. Like I still I still can't figure out communism and
right.
I don't understand that one bit. Like it's whether it be control or whatever it may be. But why would it matter so much to them what we think over here? That's I guess they're like, well, they're going to come over here and try to change us. Like, no, we're not. We're content here. Like, I don't know.
Well, a great TV show that sort of explores some of those issues was Battlestar Galactica, the remake Battlestar Galactica. And the whole premise there is humanity is nearly wiped out by aliens. And, so the remainder of humanity, despite all their differences, bands together against them. But as time goes on, you start seeing that people start acting in their own self-interest again, right?
Yeah.
And pretty soon it's not the bad guys, and the Cylons in that case. It's other humans, and that, so I think there's some truth in that. I mean, we forget very easily. We were so unified after 9/11. We forgot very quickly. It evolved into partisan bickering, and
That's truth. That's truth.
So, I think that what Reagan said, there's truth in that. We do unify against an outside threat, but sometimes that unity doesn't last too long, and even after World War II, it didn't take too long after World War II, it ended in 1945. And by 1960, I mean, it was countercultural revolution and, the whole thing. So,
yep.
It's a temporary fix. It doesn't fix human nature. It just our self-interest, again,
it's
makes us bind together.
Our primal instincts seem to overwhelm the logical train of thought. It's scary.
Right.
I wish it weren't that way, but you think because our technology is leapfrog. I'll tell you what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. Eventually, because it's an ego thing, and it's a contest of the intelligent community. They're making AI at a crazy rate. And I just started. I don't know much about this yet. I just started reading about these xenobots. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a Facebook thing. Turns out it's real. So I'm going to look deeper into it. But the point I make is, one day, if we let AI get out of control, what's going to end up happening is probably how Terminator is going to play out, right? They're going to be like, well, these people are nuts. They're destroying everything. We don't need them. Because they don't have an image per se, right? They don't have an agenda, nor do they have an emotion to it, right? So we would be inadequate to them. And that's the idea of AI scares me to my core. Especially, and again, I have her here in my house. I have Alexa. She knows me better than any of Alexa knows more about me than my mother or any other relative I have. She knows everything because it's programmed. I speak to her. What's this? Alexa, do that. Alexa, do this, et cetera, et cetera. So if I were to go to my mom, and I just said this the other night, and Mom, what's my favorite song? What do I want to listen to? She'll make suggestions I won't even get near to Mark, but Alexa knows just what to play. You know what I mean? And that should concern people.
But what saves us is Alexa doesn't recognize itself as an intelligent being. It doesn't recognize it's anything because it doesn't have sentience. So
right.
And so in many ways it's far dumber than your dog.
Yeah.
Maybe not dumber than my dog, but it's probably dumber than your dog. And so it's so it's
that's right now though.
What we have to worry about is the day when the computers figure out that spark of sentience happens and which maybe never does. Who knows what causes that? We don't even know why we're sentient. I mean, I have religious beliefs that inform me of why I think we're sentient, but that's not very scientific, Right. I mean, that's, so how can we figure out first how to make something sentient, or even, if we can't even figure out like our own sentience.
I just gave myself chills. I thought, what if I go ask Alexa, like, Alexa, what are you? And even though it'll have a pre-programmed answer,
it'll have a pre-programmed. Yeah.
What if it allows itself, like, wait a minute, what am I? And I triggered the whole end, right?
it really makes you, the question of consciousness is interesting, and not just getting away from computer consciousness, but let's talk about our own consciousness.
Sure.
And we're conscious, we're aware of what's going on, but then sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're asleep, and sometimes we're doing things. Sometimes, my mother, before she passed away, she had she didn't have Alzheimer's, but she had, because she was having problems with her kidneys, she wasn't getting enough blood to her brain. So she was kind of not fully aware of what was going on, and she really wasn't aware of time and place. Although she could fool all the nurses. I mean, the nurses would, what's your name? What's your social security number? And she would answer, and the nurse would look at me and smile and she'd go, oh, she's well oriented. I'm like, oh yeah, really? Okay, let me ask this. Oh, hey mom, where are you right now? And she would go, oh, we're in San Antonio, Texas. She's like, oh, we're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in a hotel, and we're at a convention. I'm like, okay, you still think she's oriented to place and time? How old are you, mom? Oh, I'm in my 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know.
I think what it is.
Well, her consciousness was impaired. Her cognition was impaired. But don't we all have a certain amount of impaired cognition? Maybe not that profoundly, but we are. We forget things or we remember things differently. People can, implant ideas in our head and memories, and remove memories that we have. There are chemical ways to actually wipe memories out. So it's kind of scary. Like, who are you? And if you have a family member with a cognitive thing like Alzheimer's, which that's actually destructive, that's destructive to the brain, that's the person's brain is dying. At what point do you say this is no longer, the person's not there anymore, or, are they there to the end? I don't know. There's so many questions to me about the nature of consciousness itself.
Here's what I've been learning.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, here's what I've been learning about that. I'd spoken to a lot of afterlife people. I'm even reaching out to psychics. I just spoke to one last night. And then I'm reading the documents of scientific study. So here's what it boils down to. The brain is right now on Earth still the most complex computer on the planet. It is still more capable than any smart computer we have currently in existence, right? And our consciousness, I think, like to answer it, I think our soul and consciousness, I think it's one and the same. I think it's just a pure form of energy. And what's happening is that energy is powering the computer, meaning your brain. And like any other computer, over years and years of wear and tear, it starts to break down. We don't utilize the full capacity of our computer, right? We don't use it all. We use what's essential in our, and to be honest, I don't think we fully perceive things either to our full capacity. I don't think we're seeing a delayed image of what our eyes are bringing. Because I just found this out recently too. Your eyes are an extension of your brain. They're not a separate organ, right? It's part of the brain. And so the eye's taking information and sending the signal to the brain, and the brain's interpreting what you're seeing. So it's not real time. When you're seeing something, it's not exactly real time. There's some latency there. So what the consciousness is, it's still a mystery to everyone, but I'm starting to think anyway, theorize that it's what most people thought was our soul, because now some of these studies show as people pass on, there is a detectable energy that disperses, right? We know the brain stays alive for X amount of time after. That's just the consciousness shutting the computer down before the departure. If you look at a construct of the universe, right? Even the cosmic web, a lot of similarities in the construct of that, our brain, and even in the tissues you see in plant life, there's a lot of similarities there. But as far as consciousness, I think that's going to stump us, or at least each one of us, until we take that next level. I'm starting to believe that we recycle as far as energy, either go to the next plane or we recycle to this one. When you're seeing someone deteriorate from a cognitive issue, understand, like imagine your computer in your house. It's got damage to it. The information's still in that computer. It's just the computer's not working adequately. There's a problem with the computer itself. So if you were to take the information from that computer and per se upload it to a brand new computer, the information would then restore. It would work at full function. It would remember everything. But unfortunately, we can't do it as people yet. But I think that's where some of these labs are trying to get to, is the idea of That's why they're mapping the brain. They want the idea of we could upload and download our consciousness, because they're starting to, not starting to figure out, I think they're assuming that it's a pure form of energy. And if you look at fiber optic cables and how they work, right? They're using light and pure energy to send information to and fro instantly. And I think they're on that same idea. They're going to try to figure out, well, how do we map the brain and then take that same energy and then, put it into a simulated computer and then try to replicate it. Now, is it you? I don't know. Because that's a scary thought too. Now you wake up one day and you're in a computer program and you're fully aware of yourself, but you're not aware of where you are, your body. That's some scary, that stuff scares me. So it's tough to say about the consciousness. It's tough to say about what makes us so self-aware. And back to what we were saying about Alexa. What makes Alexa unself-aware? I mean, it seems pretty sophisticated. You could ask pretty somewhat complex questions, and she'll somewhat give you a pretty good answer based upon information that's been pre-recorded. But then what does our brain do? We just absorb information. So like if someone taught you something in grade school and they ask you about it when you're in your 30s, your brain's doing what Alexa does. It's now got to search for that info for something that was pre-uploaded, so you could then answer the question. Scary concept, right?
Yeah. No, I'm kind of similar. So I feel like what makes us conscious, like you're not going to find that by the structure of the brain. This is what I suspect. I don't know this.
Right.
This is my suspicion. It's not the brain. It's like that consciousness resides there,
right.
And relies on the brain to express itself. But that's not like where it came from. It came from somewhere else. And if you're religious, you could say it comes from heaven. If you're not, you could just say another dimension. But it resides somewhere else. But it inhabits your brain, right? And that's where it can find its place in our universe.
Right.
But it's also limited by your brain. So all of these consciousness could be of equal intelligence and wisdom and whatever, else. But it has to, in order to function, it has to function through potentially faulty wiring, of the brain. So it limits the full expression of our consciousness, right? I think that maybe is what it is. And so when you see someone with cognitive issues, that the consciousness is still there, or if you want to use religious terms, the soul is still there. It's just
the computer's breaking down,
express itself because the hardware is not working.
That's the real question, right? It's like I was saying, it's a pure. I think our conscious and soul one and the same. I think it's just pure energy, and like you said, it's utilizing this machine, our body, and then the machine's controlled by the brain, which is the computer. Now, no computer is any good without a download of information, right? It's just a computer that has the capability to do things, but without the programming, it's not going to operate. And the real question is, where do we get our download? That's still the mystery. That is still going to be the mystery, I think. Where are we downloaded from? Where does it
Well, yeah. And my thing too is, I don't know if it's pure energy, or if it is energy, it's a form of energy that we can't measure, because
right.
We can measure brain activity, but we know what causes brain activity. I mean, that's neurons firing in your brain, so that's the hardware there. So
right.
If you think of it in terms of like that consciousness is actually from somewhere else, we're not measuring it. You know what I mean? We're not able to measure that it doesn't seem that excess energy that comes from it. So it could be a type of energy that we are unable to measure.
Right,
we know
we can't perceive
there are types of energy we can't measure, like dark energy. We can't measure dark energy because that's why it's called dark energy. So it could be something like that.
Yeah, it could be a frequency we can't see either. I worked in radiology for some years, right? And there's certain organs and tissue and things you can't see without a contrast injection, whether it be ingested or intravenously put in, right?
Right.
Also, when you're using MRI, now you're using, it's a form of magnetics that's basically repeating itself, allowing you to see an image, et cetera, et cetera. And that's based on a certain frequency. Maybe we don't have the technology yet. Maybe we come with a scanner we think is going to be for medical practical purpose. Unknowingly, it allows us to map things we weren't able to see before. Now, that's like, X-ray was an accident. We found that by accident. We were testing nuclear devices and seeing cast shadows on stones and walls. And yeah, X-ray was not something we sat around and said, you know what I want to make today. We had no idea how to use that. We just happened to know the outcome of nuclear blasts and radiation pushing imaging around, and we experimented with the idea. Right? Most great ideas came from accidents, right? I think
a lot of them did.
Yeah, to your point. Good. Oh, right. So I was going to say, to your point, it makes me think about what you're saying, like what is controlling us, what is the consciousness, or what is our soul, one or the other, and how will we map that? That's a good question.
And that could be something that is just not within our capability to do. I mean, we have to, we see what's here. We can see with our eyes. And then over time, we've been able to supplement that, our senses, our eyes and our ears and our ability to taste and smell. We've been able to supplement that with scientific devices that allow us to see further into, the electromagnetic spectrum and so forth, and into, tiny little areas of the cell and that sort of thing. But we're far from seeing it all. We're not. Yeah. I think we're not even close to getting down to seeing everything that's here. Like when scientists are like, most of the universe is made out of something that we have no idea what it is because we can't detect it. That right there is enough to tell you that we're missing a whole bunch.
Oh yeah,
stuff.
I think what's going to happen.
Plain view.
We're going to do this thing like Elon's got this Neuralink coming out, and it's initially going to be for repairing cognitive problems, right? It's going to help, or at least try to address those issues. Now I wonder, because if you hear some people talk about it, it's going to be a chip in your brain where you eventually will be able to speak without words. But what happens when you are able to consciously control your subconscious? That's a scary thought too, because imagine you're putting this chip in there, and now you're letting two worlds collide. You're at that point, there's no texting because you could just communicate instantly with not even words, just knowing. Like when you send something, you just know, you don't have to put it into words. In that capacity, you'll communicate like that. But then if you put that chip in and you start utilizing both conscious and subconscious, that's got me wondering too what's going to be the outcome.
Yeah, and there already are ways of sort of working those two together. There is this field of psychology, lucid dreaming, which is the idea of basically through training and practice, you get to the point where you're dreaming, and then you can take control of your dream. So that's a really good example, I guess, of being able to do like what you said already, combine the consciousness with the unconsciousness. And some psychologists say that it has very powerful applications, and some, I'm sure, people say it's that's my dog right there. not the smart one. I'm sure that some psychologists say that it's all just hogwash, but I think there is some thought that at least there's a therapeutic use for this lucid dreaming. And so yeah, I mean,
I can name.
We're really just scratching the surface of what's going on in our brains.
I can name a handful of times where I had a dream and I woke up from it, because in the dream I was very aware I was dreaming, and I was like, all right, I can't do this, and I would wake up from it. I can name a few times that's happened, and I don't know that I did.
And that's
it was
usually
by
what
design.
happens. I think that's usually what happens. Like happens to me. Once you know it's a dream, you wake up. But the key in lucid dreaming and through practice and stuff is that
stay in there.
You realize it's a dream, you don't wake up, and then you kind of unlock a whole bunch of stuff that you can do.
Yeah. See, maybe so I'm going to try to pre-program the next time I'm in a dream state and I'm aware of it and I know I'm dreaming. I'm going to, instead of backing out, I'm going to try to stay in. Never considered it. Typically when I'm having a dream where I'm aware it's a dream, whether it be a pleasant dream or an unpleasant dream, yeah, my immediate reaction is like, I'm dreaming. This has got to stop. And then I wake up. And then I have to go back to sleep and hope I don't dream.
I have trouble. See, sometimes I do have I'll be having a real bad dream and I'll realize it's a dream or start suspecting it's a dream. And then very quickly I wake up, and much to my relief. But there are sometimes when I'm having a great dream, like I just won the lottery and I'm set for life. And I'm like, oh, this is so great. And then all of a sudden I realize it's a dream. And then I realize I'm starting to wake up. I'm like, no, don't wake up, but I can't stay in there. I can't enjoy the fact that I just won the lottery.
That they're talking about that one day, kind of like the Matrix, where they're predicting. I was watching this documentary and it's talking about what if your life could be perfect. And what they mean by that is you plug in, right? You're conscious in a constant dream state and to whatever you're liking, right? The question I have for that is, what's the trade-off? Because it's not free. So what's the
point?
Yeah.
I mean, our life is about
experiences,
both the joys and the sorrows and tragedy. That's the tapestry of life, right? I mean, I think one without the other is not fulfilling.
I agree.
A life without adversity, as sad as it is.
I like getting up and learning things and being hands-on, and I'm not thrilled with cold weather, but it's needed so you can enjoy the warm weather, right? It's got to have its trade-off. So
right, and think about it. Have you ever heard of a popular video game where you just go in and you win every time?
No.
No matter what you do? No.
Yeah.
That's no fun. That's not exciting. That's what that would be like.
Yeah, you definitely need challenge in life. There's no question of that. Well, Derek, we're approached here towards the end. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that's it. I've really enjoyed our conversations. I've had we've gone the whole gamut from police work and shady BAs to Bigfoot and the afterlife.
Yeah,
so I think we're good.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. I enjoyed it. All right, Derek, we're definitely do this again. I know that's coming.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Indeed. We'll talk soon. Have a good night.
Thanks.